It's been 30 years since the skies above the hills of Bethlehem were lit up with the light of heaven. 30 years since the host of heaven appeared to some shepherds and the good news of God's salvation was announced to this earth. 30 years since, as Luke recounts for us, an angel of the Lord appeared to them, the shepherds, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were filled with great fear. And the angel said to them, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord." Well, that baby, the Savior, is now a man, and he's doing what he was born to do, the work of his Father, that his Father has sent him to do, accomplish the salvation of God, to conquer and undo the evil and corruption that was unleashed upon this world in the garden, and to heal the evil and corruption that's plagued the heart of man ever since, and to make a way for us to be reunited with the God who made us and loves us and refuses to lose us to our sin. Jesus lived in obscurity for the most of his life. After being born in Bethlehem and a brief time living in Egypt to escape Herod, Jesus and his family, they returned to Nazareth. That's where Joseph and Mary were from. And for about 30 years, no one but his family and friends and neighbors had ever heard of him. To them, he's just Jesus, son of Joseph and Mary, the carpenter's son. Well, as we all know, that's going to change and quickly. And one day, one year, Jesus is going to make his way to Jerusalem to join the week-long Passover celebration, a trip that he would have made every year of his life. But this time, things are going to change. And Jesus is going to step out of that obscurity and begin to become the most famous person to ever walk the earth. And 2,000 years later, billions of people still know the name Jesus of Nazareth today. That's pretty amazing, actually, considering that the public life and ministry of Jesus was at most 3 years long. Anyway, in the year 27 AD, Jesus is in Jerusalem at the Passover, and for the first time, he steps into the limelight. John tells us in John 2:23, "Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs that he was doing." And in the story today that we're going to cover, we're about 6 months into that short public life and ministry of Jesus. 6 months since Jesus announced his presence in Jerusalem. Jesus has been baptized by John the Baptist. He's faced his adversary, the devil, in the desert. He's called and chosen his 12 disciples who will become his apostles. He's confronted the rulers of the temple. He's visited Samaria. He's returned to Galilee and has taken up residence in the city of Capernaum on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. And Matthew puts it this way, "And he went throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures and paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis and from Jerusalem and from Judea and from beyond the Jordan." And so now it's getting to be fall of that first year, and Jesus is still traveling throughout Galilee. He's still doing what he came to do. I don't know if you remember, but this was going back a few months now. Last fall, we kind of left off this story to go back and focus on the birth of Jesus for Christmas time. And we had just finished several weeks at looking at one of the most famous events recorded in the Bible. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. It's the longest recorded teaching of Jesus that we have. This is when Jesus gathers his disciples and his followers and those who believe in him, and he gives them a kind of a State of the Union address. Jesus has been traveling all over Galilee, demonstrating his authority to this world, healing people of all kinds of diseases and infirmities, demonstrating his authority over the supernatural realm as well. Even the demons must obey him whenever he rebukes them and tells them to leave. And he's attracting bigger and bigger crowds wherever he goes. And he's attracting more and more attention from the powers that be in Jerusalem. The leaders of the Jewish people are not happy with what Jesus is doing and saying, and they're not happy with his popularity with the people. And as we've discussed, there's one group of people that are especially displeased with Jesus. The religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, see, they considered themselves the ruling authority on all things to do with God. They thought they knew the scriptures best, and they were the ones who knew and obeyed God's law the best, and they held the respect and the admiration of the people. And so when Jesus shows up and people start to turn to him and listen to him about the things of God, well, they aren't too pleased. So it's not just the crowds of regular people that begin to follow Jesus around. The Pharisees also start to follow him around and watch him and listen to him. And they begin to speak up. And they voice their opposition to all kinds of things that Jesus is saying and doing. They begin to question him, trying to trip him up, trying to get him to say something that will discredit him in front of the people. But apparently they don't know who they're dealing with. And every time they speak up with their trick questions and complaints, Jesus exposes their false motives and their ignorance of what his Father really wants and what God's word really says. And every time showing everyone watching and listening just who it is that really knows God and really knows what God's word says and what God wants. So one day, during all of this, Jesus calls kind of a timeout. And he takes his followers out of the city and up on a mountain, and he explains to them what's really going on. That's the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus explaining to his followers just who they are and who they're supposed to be in this world and what his Father's plans are for them, and explaining to them what the Pharisees have wrong and why he is so opposed to them, and how those who believe in him will be different from the Pharisees. And Jesus tells them how they'll take their place in the great salvation plan of God, how they will now begin to carry the light of heaven, the light of Jesus, into this world, how they will now, like the prophets of God before them, carry the good news of God's kingdom and light up this world wherever they go. And Jesus ends his sermon, though, with a warning. He warns everyone not just to listen to what he's saying, but to believe him and put their faith in him. He warns them of the dire predicament that awaits those who don't. Jesus calls everyone to choose, is the bottom line. The kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of earth. The treasures and rewards of heaven or the treasures and rewards of the earth. You can't have both. Everyone has to choose. Are you in this life for your own glory or for the glory of God? Are you in this life for yourself or are you in this life for others? There's a narrow path that's difficult and hard and lonely to travel, and there's a broad path that's wide and easy to walk, and many take it. And Jesus says, make your choice. It's one or the other. Jesus says, hear these words of mine and do them, and your life will have a foundation as solid as a rock. But hear these words of mine and ignore them, your life will have nothing but shifting sand to hold you up. Everyone has to choose. And it finishes, and when Jesus finished saying these things, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. This isn't the first time we've heard this, and it won't be the last. Over and over, the gospel writers point out not just the power and authority of his miracles, but the power and authority of his word and of his message. Okay, so today we're going to leave Matthew's gospel for a bit and pick up the story in Luke, actually. So have a look at Luke chapter 7 there. You can see in Luke chapter 6, Luke's recounting of the Sermon on the Mount. It's not as long as Matthew's, but you can see the conclusion there in the end with the same warning about building your house on the rock. So what happens next? Verse 1. After he finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Okay, Sermon on the Mount's over. Jesus has brought them all up to speed on the situation, and so he heads back down the mountain to Capernaum. Verse 2. Now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. Okay, a centurion, a Roman. This is a member of the Roman army. Not necessarily, in fact, not likely an actual person that came from Rome, okay? The Roman Empire by this time was huge. And Rome conscripted their army from the lands that they conquered by this time. And this guy, being a career soldier, that's what centurions were. They were the highest ranking enlisted men. They were the NCOs, we would call them, non-commissioned officers. This guy was probably conscripted or enlisted in Syria and has worked his way up the ranks over the years to attain this top spot for a soldier, a centurion, a commander of 100. That's what that means. Now, centurions didn't necessarily have exactly 100 men under their command, but they'd have about that amount. They were the top soldiers. This centurion was stationed in Capernaum. So Capernaum wasn't a huge city, but it was on an important trade route, so the Romans kept a presence there. Anyway, this centurion, we don't know his name, but he has a servant. The word there in the Greek is doulos. It means a bond servant or a slave. Nothing unusual about that. Centurions were not permitted to marry. They had to go wherever they were told, whenever they were told to go there. And so the Roman army didn't want them tied down or thinking of home. And they made decent money, too. They were paid quite well compared to the lower ranks. So a centurion's household would be a household of servants, of slaves. And one of this centurion's servants, one of his slaves, was sick, and sick to the point of death. As in, he's not going to get better, he's going to die soon. And there's one more thing about this servant. You can see it there in verse 2. This servant was highly valued by this centurion. Okay, that's unusual. At this time, in this place in history, in the first century, under the rule and law of the Roman Empire, those who were doulos, who were bond servants, they were considered possessions. They were treated kind of like tools, and tools that were kept and looked after and used by their masters. They could be bought, they could be sold, and when they ceased being useful, when they could no longer fulfill their function, they could be thrown away. And yet here in Capernaum, we have a centurion who doesn't think that way about his tools, his servants, at least about this one anyway. Luke says that this sick to the point of death servant is highly valued by this centurion. Highly valued is one word in Greek. It's called entomos. It means honored or precious. Peter uses this word to describe how God feels about Jesus, actually. 1 Peter 2:6 says, "Behold, I'm laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. He is a living stone, rejected by men, but in the sight of God chosen and precious." Precious there both times is the same word, entomos. That's how God feels about Jesus, and that's the word that's used to describe how this centurion feels about his sick and dying servant. He loves his servant. Verse 3. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. Okay, that first phrase is a bit misleading in the English, in the ESV there. Other translations put it more like, and having heard about Jesus. That's what Luke is pointing out. This guy, this Roman centurion, has heard about Jesus. Of course he has. Everyone in Capernaum would have heard about Jesus by now. Everyone in the whole land would have heard the rumors and the stories and the reputation of Jesus. And this centurion has a servant that he loves, a servant that is sick and getting worse. He's dying. And today, as Jesus returns with his followers to Capernaum, this centurion can take it no longer, and he makes a decision. He's going to ask Jesus for help. Isn't this interesting? How is it that the centurion is going to ask Jesus for help? He sends, verse 3, elders of the Jews to make the request of Jesus on his behalf. Again, this is unusual. The Jewish people, for the most part, did not appreciate the Romans. In fact, they mostly despised their Roman overlords. Yet here is a Roman soldier nonetheless, that can ask for the help of the Jews, and they help him. And not just any Jews, the elders of the Jews. This Roman officer, this Roman occupier, sends the elders of the Jews on an errand for him, and they go willingly. This is not normal, and it gets even more unusual. Verse 4, and when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly. These guys were not just delivering a message. They're on the centurion's side. They are for him and his request. They want Jesus to help this guy. Verse 4, and when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, he is worthy to have you do this for him. We want to help this man, they say to Jesus. He deserves help, Jesus. And then they give two reasons why in verse 5. For he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue. Okay, for the most part, the Romans didn't hate the Jews. The Romans didn't hate any of the peoples of the lands that they'd conquered and ruled. Their conquered peoples were just a source of income for Rome. The Roman Empire was actually quite tolerant of different cultures and religions as long as they remained peaceful and paid their taxes. That's what the Pax Romana, if you've ever heard of that, the Roman peace was all about, money and trade. That's why they built all the roads. That's why they stationed all the garrisons. They wanted peaceful money making. Well, this centurion, this Roman centurion, again, he doesn't fit the mold. He's not indifferent to the Jewish people. He's not just tolerant of them because they pay their taxes. The elders of the Jews in Capernaum say to Jesus, "Jesus, please help this man. He's not like the other Romans. He loves our nation. He loves your people, Jesus. He loves us." And they give Jesus some evidence of this love that this Roman centurion has for the nation of Israel. He's the one who built us our synagogue. Jesus, they say, this guy isn't just blowing smoke our way. He really does love us. He's the one who built the synagogue. He put his money where his mouth is. He's the real deal. Jesus, help this man. He deserves it, is their message. So what's Jesus going to do in this kind of unusual situation? The elders of the Jews, a group of people that are not really his friends. The leadership of the Jews, for the most part, do not like Jesus. I mean, many of them are actively trying to get rid of him and even kill him. Yet they set aside their dislike of Jesus for the sake of helping this foreigner, this Roman. And they've come hat in hand to Jesus, begging for help. What's Jesus going to do? Verse 6, and Jesus went with them. Oh, of course he did. When does Jesus ever turn down genuine requests for help? Verse 6, and Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends. Okay, so Jesus listens to the Jewish elders explain the situation, who this man is and what he wants and why they want to help him. And he's like, okay, let's go. And then they all head off to the centurion's house. But they don't get very far when a new group of people arrive. Another group of people sent by the centurion show up with another message for Jesus. Before the Jewish leaders can get Jesus to the house, the centurion dispatches a group of friends this time with another request for Jesus. What does the centurion ask for this time? Verse 6. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it." So the friends of the centurion, they deliver his message to Jesus. They come to Jesus and they say, he says, "Don't trouble yourself to come to my house, Jesus. I know what it's like to have authority. I know what it's like to give commands and have them followed. I have authority, and I know you do too. And just like I can command people and make them move, you can give the command, and my servant's illness will be gone. No need for you to trouble yourself with visiting the house of a Gentile. I know you can heal him anytime from anywhere. Please just say the word, and it will be done." Okay, so how is Jesus going to respond to this development? What's he going to think about what this second group of people say about this unusual centurion? Verse 9. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him. When Jesus hears what this centurion's friends are saying, he marveled at the centurion. Okay, this word marveled, it's be astonished, be astounded, be amazed. It's used 43 times in the New Testament. Take a guess at what the majority of those uses are about. Most of the time when this word is used, who is marveling at who? Yeah, it's the people marveling at Jesus. Jesus is the one being marveled at. This occasion here, though, is one of the only 2 times in the Bible where it says Jesus is doing the marveling. Why is Jesus marveling at this man? No need to guess. Jesus is going to tell everyone. Verse 9, when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." That's why Jesus marveled at this man and what he was saying. I told you that the Bible only records 2 times when it says Jesus marveled. The only other time is recorded by Mark, and it's already happened in the story. It was when Jesus returned from his trip to Jerusalem and went to his hometown in Nazareth and taught in his hometown synagogue. Remember what happened? Yeah, they tried to kill him. He announces the good news to his hometown, and he casts out a demon right in front of them, and his own people, his own neighbors, reject him so harshly that they want to put him to death. And Mark 6:6 says, and he marveled because of their unbelief. Fast forward a few months, and Jesus hears who this centurion is and what he has done and what he has to say to Jesus, and again, Jesus marvels. Put these two occasions together, and what causes Jesus to marvel? The lack of faith, of belief he has found in his own people, and the great faith that he has found in this Gentile. Okay, now think about this though. Just because Jesus marveled at these things doesn't mean that he was surprised by them. We can be astounded and yet unsurprised at the same time, can we not? I've never been to Israel. Not sure I would want to go today. Kind of a unruly place right now, it seems. But I know have people who have had the chance to go. And when I've asked them what their trip was like, they would use words like amazing, unbelievable, marvelous even, astounding. Here's the thing. None of them were surprised by what they found there. They knew they were going to Israel. They knew they were going to the Temple Mount and the Garden Tomb and the Jordan River and all the other biblical places to visit. Yet they still feel blown away and astounded when they're actually standing there on their own 2 feet, seeing these places with their own eyes. Okay, maybe that's what's going on here when Jesus marvels. Jesus isn't surprised. He knows what's going on. He always knows what's going to happen when he begins the work of his Father. He knows what he's going to face, what he's up against with his own people, but it's still astounding to see it when it happens right in front of his eyes. And this has been God's rebuke against his people from the beginning, this lack of faith. Of all the people on the face of the earth where faith in God should be found, it's Israel, the family of Jacob. God has chosen them and formed them into his nation. He'd given them the light of truth. They've seen his work. They have his words. Over the centuries, he has fought for them. He has fed them. He has conquered their enemies. He has given them a home. He has sent them prophet after prophet with his message of salvation and hope. Yet despite all that God has done for them, how have his people responded? What's the prognosis for the people? Yeah, God tells Ezekiel and the other prophets too. Ezekiel 12:2, Son of man, you dwell in the midst of a rebellious house, who have eyes to see but see not, who have ears to hear but hear not, for they are a rebellious house. God is like, out of all the nations on the earth, this nation has no excuse. I have given them all they need to believe in me. I have given them eyes to see the truth, and I have given them ears to hear it, yet they refuse to see, and they refuse to listen. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 14, "In the law it is written, by people of strange tongues and by lips of foreigners will I speak to this people, and even then they will not listen to me, says the Lord." And Jesus knows he's going to find very little faith where he should find it, in his own people, and that he's going to find much faith in others, specifically this Roman centurion. And Jesus has just finished telling his followers what it means to be his disciple. Jesus has just told them who they are to be and what they are to be like in this world. How they're to stand out against the darkness and the deception of this world. How they're to be salt and light. What characteristics are going to mark those who truly believe in him in this life. And now Jesus has returned to Capernaum and found a shining example of what he was just talking about in the Sermon on the Mount. And it's not even one of his own people. It's a Roman centurion. And even though Jesus is not surprised by this, he's still astounded when it actually plays out in front of him. This Roman centurion exemplifies the things that Jesus has just told his followers that they should be. In a world where useless servants are thrown away, this man loves his servant. This man cared about the needs of others, even others that were largely considered disposable, those on the low rank of society. Despite the fact that the Jewish people despised the Romans, this Roman loves those who hate him. He even takes his own money and builds them a synagogue. And this man understands who Jesus is. He shows no doubt about who is who in this situation and who actually has the authority. He's entirely unlike the Pharisees. He's not in this for his own gain. He's not arrogant. He's not questioning. He's not trying to win accolades. He's trying to save his servant. And this guy knows who he's talking to. Question: when the Jewish leaders approach Jesus with the centurion's plea for help, they tell Jesus that he should do this for the centurion. Jesus should help him. Why? Why did they say? Look back at verse 4. Why should you help this man, Jesus? Because he's worthy of your help, they say. He deserves your help. But here's the thing. That's not what the centurion seems to think. In fact, he believes just the opposite. What does the centurion tell his friends to tell Jesus on his behalf? Look back at verse 6 for a second. Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy. Despite what the Jewish elders are saying, I know the truth. This man says, I know I am not worthy of your attention. I'm not worthy to have you in my house. I'm not even worthy enough to approach you myself. I don't deserve anything from you. I know that. Yet I know you can do this. I believe in your great authority. No need to come any closer. If you would, please just give the command, and I know my servant will live. And Jesus, although not surprised, marvels at him. In Matthew's version of the story, we hear a little more of Jesus' response. I'll read it for you. Jesus says to the crowd, truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from the east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus is like, this guy gets it. This guy is kingdom bound. And guess what? There are going to be many more like him. There are going to be many Gentiles that have a place in the kingdom, and there are going to be Jews that will find no place there. And he tells the crowd, I wish my own people had faith in me like this guy does. You know what this story reminds me of a little bit? There's another story in the Bible, something that happens just before Jesus goes back to his Father. It's a story about one of the disciples, Thomas. And after his resurrection, Jesus unexpectedly appears to a group of disciples, but Thomas is not among the group. So when Peter and John and the other guys, they tell Thomas, hey, we've seen Jesus. What does Thomas say? The other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord, but he said to them, unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my fingers into the mark of his nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe. Well, Jesus loves Thomas. It doesn't hold this against him. When Jesus does see Thomas 8 days later, he tells Thomas, go ahead, put your finger here and see my hands. Put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe. Jesus then says, you believed because you have seen me. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. I know that when we read this statement of Jesus, we think of ourselves for the most part. Right? We think of all the followers of Jesus that will come to believe in him, having never seen him, having never heard his voice, having never heard words from his lips. All the Christians through the last 2,000 years who have not seen but yet still believed. And all that's true. But long before you and me, before the church age even begins really, this centurion has already got the message. This guy is already someone who hasn't seen, yet he believes. This centurion has not talked to Jesus. He's not spent time with Jesus. He's only heard of Jesus, and yet his faith is so great that Jesus marvels at him. He's not seen, yet he believes anyway. And Jesus is very pleased to find such faith, even if it's not in his own people. Well, what's going to happen? Is Jesus going to grant this request for healing? Well, of course he is. He always responds to those who come to him in honesty and humility and belief. And this centurion is all of those things. And Jesus rewards his great faith. Verse 10. And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. No recovery time, no he's getting better, no medicine or bed rest necessary. Jesus answers the request, and the servant is well, healthy, and made whole again. I'll continue with the story. Verse 11. Soon afterward, he went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a great crowd went with him. Soon afterward, that's sometimes translated the next day. Soon after the healing of the centurion servant in Capernaum, Jesus decides to go to a town called Nain. And it would have been quite a walk, actually. Nain's about 30 kilometers west of Capernaum. Not too far from Nazareth, actually. This wouldn't have been a casual stroll, is the point. It's a good 6 or 7 hour walk. And soon after he heals the servant of the centurion, Jesus decides to make it. And his disciples and a great crowd, as usual, are following him as he goes. Verse 12, as he drew near to the gate of the town, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a considerable crowd from the town was with her. Okay, the gate of the town. Okay, don't picture a big town with like a stone wall or a palisade or a white picket fence around it or something, with some kind of little gate in it where you had to go through to get into the town. The bigger cities often had walls around them or parts of them or through them, but towns generally didn't. There was no gate like some kind of archway or swinging door with an enter sign above it or anything like that. The gates of a town were basically just the place where the main thoroughfare went in and out of the town. It's where the vendors gathered and the place where business was done with those from other towns. It's where the elders of the synagogue would often sit and listen to the people and make judgments and enforce the law. And they would watch and see who's coming and who's going. Anyway, after a long walk, as Jesus and the crowd following him are coming down the road and they begin to get close to the town of Nain, they see a crowd of people heading in the opposite direction, heading out of the town towards them. And it's a funeral procession. A man has died, either during the night or during the day while Jesus was making his way there. The Jewish people did not leave dead bodies unburied overnight. So this man had just died that very day, perhaps while Jesus and his followers were walking there. And his mother is leading the funeral procession out of the town to bury the body. Needless to say, this is not a joyous occasion. There would have been much crying and wailing. Verse 12 says a considerable crowd from the town was walking and mourning with her. Luke tells us that this woman who is about to put her son in the grave is a widow, and that this is her only son. Now, as you can imagine, in this day and age, a widow, she has no husband to provide for her, to provide protection and shelter, and now her only son is gone too. It's going to be rough times for this lady. But the pain that she would feel, losing her only son, would go beyond just worry about her future without him. Whether you're a widow or not, for a family to lose its only son is the disappearance of your family, your history, your heritage, your household. It's the end of the line. The story of your family is over. This is a great tragedy for this woman. All hope is lost. There's no coming back from this, right? It's the end of your family. Your only son is dead. Your husband is dead. The sense of loss this woman would have had, the disappointment, and the feeling of being cursed by God. That's what everyone would have been thinking, wondering if this was some kind of judgment by God. That's how they would have thought of it, if a family coming to an end. They'd all be thinking, hey, this is over. God has left this family. All hope is gone. Their only hope for a family is now being carried out of town on a funeral bier, a wooden plank. Well, this is the scene that Jesus and his followers encounter as they approach the town of Nain. What's Jesus going to think of this? What's Jesus going to do? Here's something. Do you think Jesus just happened to walk 6 or 7 hours and accidentally end up in the town of Nain at the exact time a funeral procession is coming out? Is it possible that this is some kind of coincidental, accidental encounter? Of course not. We've already seen in several stories that not only does Jesus always know exactly what he's doing, he knows what everyone else is doing and even thinking too. And he knows what his Father wants him to do. John 5 says, so Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing. Jesus has a plan. He always does, and it's his Father's plan. And so one day he gets up and he says, come on, boys, we're going to Nain today. I got something to do. And off they go, crowd in tow. And they get to Nain, and they meet the crowd of the mourners accompanying the widow who has just lost her son. Verse 13, and when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said to her, do not weep. Hey, if you were to take a guess at the emotional state that most describes Jesus, When the Bible mentions how Jesus feels, what feeling is it that Jesus is most commonly said to have? It's compassion. That's what Jesus feels most of the time in the Gospels. And Jesus comes to this woman who has lost everything, and his heart fills with compassion for her. And he's not going to let it stand. And he's going to do something about all that pain. And he tells her, you can stop crying. Verse 14, then he came up and touched the bier, and the bearers stood still. Sometimes the gospel writers just drop these little things out. How does Jesus stop a crowd with just a touch? I don't know. How does Jesus clear out the temple all by himself? I don't know that either, but he did. He can do things like this. Verse 14, and he came up and touched the bier, and the bearers stood still, and he said, young man, I say to you, arise. Notice again, Jesus is not afraid of defilement. Anyone else who had touched the body, anyone who had been in the house with it, anyone who touched anything the body had touched, including this bier, would have become instantly unclean for 7 days. But not Jesus. The defilements of this world has no power over him. All the things of this world that stain us have no power over Jesus. When Jesus comes into contact with defilement, it's the defilement that loses. Nothing has the power to stain the Son of God, even death, even his own death, as he'll one day show. And this day, when Jesus comes upon this scene of death and sorrow and mourning and defilement, he walks up to the center of it and puts a stop to it and says to the dead man, the only son of the widow, young man, get up. Imagine now having a voice so powerful, even the dead can hear it. And when Jesus says, get up, life surges back into this man. Verse 15, and the dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Again, he sits up and starts talking. He's ready to go. No doctor's checkup, no meds, no rehab. He's healed. And Jesus is like, here he is. Weep no more. Your son, your only son, has been raised to life again. I'm sure you can see there are some connections that could be made between what Jesus is doing here and bringing this only son back from the grave, and of Jesus giving this woman her hope back, and some connections to what Jesus himself is going to do not too long from now. Jesus is showing them a picture of what God is doing for his people, what he is going to do for his people. The day before, Jesus was just singing the praises of a Gentile, a Roman soldier, marveling aloud at the great faith of this foreigner and telling them all straight up, I'm not finding this kind of faith in my own people. Does this mean that Jesus is somehow, in some way, going to write off his own people? That for their lack of faith in him, Jesus is like, forget it. I've had it with you people. I've given you eyes, yet you refuse to see. I've given you ears, yet you refuse to listen. I'm done with you. I'm going to all Gentiles from now on. Going to get me some more Roman centurions. They seem to understand what's going on better than you guys. They seem to deserve it more than my own people. No, Jesus is not like that. And the next day, Jesus makes a long journey to find a particular Jewish woman. A Jewish woman at the end of the line. A woman whose family is just about to disappear from Israel forever. One of the families of Israel is coming to an end. Notice what doesn't happen in this story. She doesn't seek Jesus out. She doesn't call out to him. She doesn't ask him for anything. She seems actually kind of oblivious to his presence until he's right in front of her. How much great faith, like the centurion, is this woman exhibiting? How much trust in the authority of Jesus is this woman expressing? None. There's no faith. There's no hope. There's no asking. It's over. There's no begging. There's no pleading. There's no really turning to Jesus at all. But Jesus has a plan, and he wants to give this woman back her hope, and give her back her family, and give her back her future, because he loves her, and he loves his people, and he wants them all to know, and he wants them all to see, and he knows that his people are almost done. Yes, they have been gathered back in the land after a fashion. Yes, they've returned to Jerusalem and rebuilt the temple, but things aren't what they used to be. Long gone are the days of King David and Solomon. Israel is just now a pale reflection of its former self. Now they're just people living under foreign occupation, a people once again forgetting and leaving their God behind. And it's getting close to the end for the family of Jacob, and Jesus knows their faith is almost gone. Jesus knows the faith of his people is weak, so weak, in fact, that they're going to reject him. His own people are going to betray him and abandon him and lie about him and beat him and kill him. And Jesus knows all this about his people. He knows it all, and he loves them anyway. And he's willing to go to endure all that his people are going to do to him. And in his love for them, he's going to place himself on his own funeral bier. And he's going to die so that his people can be brought back to life. And he knows their faith is gone. He knows their hope is fading. And he's not going to let that stand. God's not going to lose his people. And he made some promises to this world. And he made some promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he's going to fulfill them. God has said from the beginning, he's going to win this whole world back. He's going to conquer the powers of darkness and rid his creation from the stain of sin. And his son is going to die to do it. No lack of weakness or faith on our part is going to stop him. This story is not about us, right, and what we can do. It's about him and what he's doing. Our faithfulness is not a deciding factor in this story. He is the faithful one, and he will do everything he said he would do. He will give his life to save his people, even as they reject and kill him. And I don't know where you're at today. Maybe you feel like the centurion. Your faith is strong. You trust in the power and authority of Jesus. Your trust is riding high. If that's you, that's wonderful. Jesus loves that. He even marvels at that kind of faith. I don't know about you. I often don't feel like that. My faith isn't always strong. My faith wavers. I sometimes find myself with faith more like Thomas, the disciple, doubting Thomas, wanting to believe, wanting to have more faith, but for whatever reason can't quite seem to grasp it. Or maybe you're more like the widow from Nain. You're feeling like you're at the end of the line. You're thinking, that's nice, Dan, good story. Jesus is faithful when we're not. But you don't understand. My faith is gone. I don't have any hope left. I've given up. This world has messed me up. I have messed me up. And there's no going back. There's no way forward. I can't do it. I have no faith left. I can't even bring myself to hope for any. Hey, I've got good news for you. That's never been a problem for Jesus before. And I doubt if it's suddenly going to become a problem for him today. Your empty, your broken heart, your dried up faith is no obstacle to the power of our King. He can do anything. He can give life to the lifeless. He can give hope to the hopeless. And if you find your faith is somehow gone, hey, good news. Jesus will gladly give you some of his. We all wish we had faith like the centurions, don't we? Reality is, not many of us do, at least sometimes. And when those days come, days when our hope and our faith is fading, today, tomorrow, or far in the future, just try and remember, Jesus wants to give life to the lifeless. Jesus wants to give hope to the hopeless. Jesus wants to give faith to the faithless. He gave his life so that we could have these things. And all you have to do is turn to him and tell him everything. Ask him to forgive you. Ask him to save you. Ask him to change you. Ask him to give you new life, and he will. It's what he's always done. It's what he loves to do. It's what he came and died to do for you and for me.